know when to intervene, when to listen, when to provide comfort. Give us the discernment to know what's best for our children, and help us to have the grace to accept the outcome of their choices. May our love for them be unwavering, and may we always be a safe and supportive agent in their lives. Keep them safe from harm, and help them to flourish in your grace and love. We pray this in the precious name. Amen. Okay. One reading, sorry. I'd like to present to you David Steverding. He's a 20-year member of the Odd Squad Production Society. Odd Squad is an organization run and founded by Vancouver Police Department. Members who volunteer their time to develop and deliver preventative-based presentations, documentary films, and programs. David has delivered presentations to thousands of youth on the risks and dangers associated with drug use and experimentation. David is an 18-year member of the DPD and worked the majority of his career in the downtown east side of Vancouver as a member of the beat enforcement team, and recently transferred to the major crimes, robbery, assault, and arson unit. David is married to his wife, Caroline, for over 28 years, and both his children graduated from STA. Andy, not too long ago.
Andy, 2021, and Chad, 2017.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, David. Thank you very much.
Hi. Nice to see some kids here tonight. How many of you were forced to come here by your parents? I did the same thing to my kids, so. As I said, I'm a member of the All Squad. We're a registered nonprofit organization. Tonight my presentation pretty much went, as with most of my presentations with drugs and addiction, it's about drug use, the risks and the consequences. What you're going to watch tonight, essentially the images, everything you're going to be watching, it's reality based, so it's images pretty much that I've captured in my 18 years working in the downtown east side. Because of reality based, you may find it upsetting. If it upsets you, you don't have to watch it. Try and listen to the information I'm trying to provide. We can make this interactive. If you have a question, you want to ask me something, please interrupt me. That's part of it. Also, you may never be bothered by this, especially for younger kids. Something you may see may bother you. And what's really important is that you talk to somebody. So either talk to a friend, talk to a sibling, talk to your parents, talk to a counselor. What I found is really good is don't keep it bottled up inside you. Even something very minor, just talk about it. Just get it out in the open. Don't suppress it. That's always been very good advice given to me. So I just wanted to make that part really clear as well. So as I said, it's reality-based. The images are graphic. So a little bit about Odd Squad. We started in 1997. We're a registered nonprofit. We are pretty much either retired or current serving Vancouver Police Department members. The reason we wanted an independent organization is so that we wouldn't be bound by the police department's command and control structure, which is really good for policing situations, for the way we do our job. Doing something like this, I think this allows us a lot of creativity. We're not bound by our department's rules. We do this completely on our own time. Some of it with the support and the blessing of our department. Other times we do it on our own without them. But we are completely an independent organization. So if you have any complaints, the department will say that this is something independent. There's no point in complaining to us because I am allowed to do this. I'm allowed to speak on my own time. So I just wanted to make it pretty clear as well. Our pathways. We focus on 3 pathways. Number 1, films. For some of the parents, you might remember 25 years ago a documentary called Through a Blue Lens, which was filmed by Vancouver police officers, actually the Odd Squad in the downtown east side, capturing the lives of people as they went through their daily ritual of addiction. Basically, the cycle for people suffering from addiction is get the money to buy their drugs, use their drugs, and repeat that cycle. Everything else takes a backseat as far as their priorities in life. Cleanliness, finding a job, where they live, health, diet, everything else takes a backseat, and their primary sole motivation in life is about their addiction and getting the drugs. So another thing, we do a lot of peer-based education programs where we take kids and we provide some sort of education, and then the kids go around and back into their own communities and they teach kids. We do presentations. Big thing for us in the last 5 years, we've really pushed our physical literacy component. We moved out of the downtown east side and we moved into a facility in Burnaby. We have a 9,000 square foot warehouse we're in now. We have a permanent gym floor, actually a strong judo floor, probably one of the best in Western North America. And our avenue for physical literacy with kids is police judo. Really good part of police judo, the main tenet to it is when you're practicing judo is that you take care of your partner. And that's something I learned from the people that got me into Oswald and that got me into policing, that we do have an ethical responsibility, no matter what situation we're dealing with when we're dealing with people, is that we do it in an ethical manner. That includes using force as police officers out of the road. So out on the road, I've had the opportunity to travel all over North America. That picture was taken in Inuvik. We were invited to Inuvik several years ago. We went as far as an island called Ulahaktak on Holman Island. Probably less than 5,000 outsiders have ever been there. So this has been nothing but a great opportunity for me, where I'm getting to travel North America actually, and remote communities, rather than going down to the resorts, Hawaii and stuff like that. I like to spend my time going to remote communities, minus 34 degrees centigrade, going for snowmobile rides, going for dog sled rides and stuff like that. It's been nothing but a great opportunity for me. Quick photo of our new facility, or the facility we've been in. Other thing that we're looking at is succession planning. It's obvious I'm not 25 anymore. A lot of the family members of Oswald, we're all getting into our 50s, into our 60s. And we're looking towards the next generation of young people that are getting involved in Oswald, so they're getting involved, volunteering their time, getting involved in judo and film work, production, broadcast work, and a lot of these young people, they have an interest to pursue a career of policing, and this is their way to do that. But we are the only judo club or martial arts club that has a component where you want to grade up to a brown belt or a black belt. You actually have to have some sort of community service volunteer work, whether it be through Law Squad or through any other organization. We're the only martial arts club that does that. As far as my career, again, I think I've been absolutely blessed with the type of work I've done. I worked for 14 months as a detective in our youth squad, working with or investigating crimes committed by or against people under the age of 18 years. I did that for about 14 months. I'm also what's called a non-firearms prohibited weapons expert, so I do examinations for the courts as far as weapons that are not firearms and whether or not they meet the status of a prohibited weapon. Also, I've been practicing judo for that's really loud.
Actually, turn it down, isn't it?
Let me just stop that and I'll turn it way down. So, we have all we usually get about 25 people on the mats and train for 2 hours Mondays and Wednesday nights and on Friday nights as well as our Oswald facility in Burnaby. We're training up on the 7 days a week. Junior judo program for kids under the age of 10 years of age. And then our intermediate programs for teenagers starting out from 10 all the way up until 18 years of age. And we do have a competitive stream for kids that are interested in going into competitive judo, where we're getting kids into that. Quite a few kids in our program, they are families that cannot afford it, and we've never made money as an inhibition for people to get involved in our sports. Simply, if kids can't afford to pay, we're basically footing the bill for that as well. So, something else, the people that got me involved with Bobby Squad over 20 years ago, their motivation for doing things was never about money. It was just about having experiences and doing things right by people, or right for people. And the big one now, our motivation for the last 5 years has been about kids. Pretty much everything we're doing is about the next generation coming up.
Can I ask, how do the kids find you? Or how do they find the program?
Mostly really a variety of ways. We are on the internet. Parents in the neighborhood, they live in the neighborhood, they're driving by, they see our front door is open, they come looking in, they find out about it that way. Parents of police officers, their kids get involved in it, friends. There is no one rule, one way. We actually have a gentleman, he's an immigrant to Honduras. He actually got turned out by a gang to deal drugs in the downtown east side. He didn't want to. He threw his drugs away. The second time they gave him drugs, he turned them over to one of our original Odd Squad members because he didn't want a deal. Al got him into a safe house and got him into a program through CBSA. He got his landed immigration status. He's got 2 boys. His 2 boys are involved in our judo program, right? There's no shortage of ways for people to get involved in our programs, you know, and yeah, it doesn't seem to be a problem for us. There seems to be a lot of kids that are getting involved in it, so no rhyme or reason. So the other part, as far as my career goes, I spent about a year and a half working in the Granville Entertainment District. This is called in Vancouver police terms, what we call an area District 1, but Granville Street. Friday, Saturday nights, we actually closed down Granville Street between pretty much Robson to Davie, so people can walk out on the roads. And we'll have, in the summer times, easily 20 to 25,000 people walking up and down, going to the bars, the bistros, the nightclubs, and basically partying. And we have a dedicated group of police officers. All they do is stay on Granville Street, 12 police officers and a sergeant, and all they do all night is deal with the problems and the fallout from the entertainment district. Obviously, the majority of problems that we're dealing with are the result of not addiction, but overconsumption of whatever substances they're using, whether it be legal or illegal. And from there, what we're dealing with usually a lot of violence, so assaults, sexual assaults, breaches of peace, public intoxication. But that's enough to keep 12 guys busy pretty much from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. every day, Friday, Saturday nights. So another area I found really fascinating to work are concerts. And part of this was to expose myself to different types of drug cultures and what goes on at them, right? So Granville Entertainment District, completely different than the downtown east side. Another area where I like to work a lot of for concerts, not this one in particular. This was, what's his name, Tyler the Creator, something like that. But I don't go so much for the music or the lack of music, but I go because it's a really interesting learning. For me, it's a learning experience because the drug culture is so different, right? And for a lot of the younger people in there, their drug of choice will be marijuana. And just for me, it's not so much. Yeah, we're in post-prohibition areas, prohibition for marijuana goes, but it's also the behaviors and how people are reacting or how people are reacting or behaving while they're under the influence of marijuana, because it is quite different than other types of drugs. So we go to a lot of these. We used to call them raves, electronic dance music parties, stuff like that. There's one called Contact at BC Place Stadium every, I think, December 26th, 27th, and that's a dusk till dawn event. We've worked quite a few of those ones. That's been a real eye-opener. It's the only event I know of where paramedics get, they'll have like, I think 3 to 4 teams of paramedics. They work extra like overtime. The event promoter pays for paramedics to work there. They have an organization called Rock Dog where they will set up beds underneath the stands. And basically what they're treating is kids' overconsumption of typically drugs that raises at ecstasy. So MDMA, stuff like that. So again, just a learning experience for me. And again, it's getting to see what the drugs look like, how people are taking them, and then also the reactions, basically how people are behaving when they're under the influence of it. I hate the music as well. Sorry. Okay. So, started working in the downtown east side in 2006, and what I learned early on working down there is that if you treat people with some respect, that goes a long way. There's a lot of people down there, they've had absolutely horrible lives, and as individual people, actually, there's quite a few of them that I actually like, and I feel absolutely horrible for what's happened. And a lot of them are down there because of certain choices that are beyond their control. What we're talking about is probably multi-generational families or multi-generations of addiction going on. This gentleman, his name is Lyle Ashmore. I've known him now for, I think, 12 years. When I first met him, he was 21, 22 years old. He just finished a stint in federal time. When he did his Fed time, he actually got clean. He got his GED, and he started working as an addictions counselor at Union Gospel Mission. And in 2012, he relapsed. And so he's been in the downtown east side since 2012. And he had, if you want to talk about somebody that hasn't had a chance, Lau probably fits into that category very well. I've arrested him several times. I've never once had a problem with him. He's had some extremely violent encounters with police in a lot of cases as a result of his drug use. But he's one of those people that if I could absolutely get him into treatment somehow, one of my partners, we've had an arrangement to get him into an indigenous treatment facility up at Minus Bay, and we had a bed waiting for him, and he just never took us up on that opportunity, right? So, but what I learned, treat people with dignity and respect. Doesn't mean you agree with what it is they're doing. Doesn't mean as a police officer you can agree or allow them to continue what they're doing, but you can still treat people with absolute respect. And there's nothing wrong. There's no harm in that either. Another gentleman I dealt with several years ago, Vincent Taylor. So this is Vincent in high school. Was actually quite a gifted athlete. Did very well in soccer and in football. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, whether he's predisposed, Vincent does have an addictive personality, and from high school for him it started off with booze. Eventually he would quit, go straight, and then he tried other types of drugs. And by about 2015, 2016, his drug of choice started off with heroin and eventually turned into fentanyl addiction, to the point where he lost contact with his dad for over 6 months. His dad didn't know if he was dead or alive. And he'd never been arrested before, so he never had a criminal record. So what happens then, if somebody dies and they've never been arrested, they go to the morgue as a John Doe. And sometimes if they have no ID, we don't know who that person is. So his dad didn't know for 6 months whether or not Vincent was alive or not. And we tripped over him in Oppenheimer Park one day. He was looking for his dad. And so as Vincent in high school, right in the throes of his addiction, this is what Vincent looked like. Can you see that, or is it a bit washed out? You okay? You can see it? That was Vincent in the throes of addiction. What you're talking about is an addiction of $300 a day. And how Vincent was trying to support that addiction early on was to steal Tylenol pills or accept it. And in the downtown east side, in the Unity East Hastings, there's what they call a market. And it's touted as a place where people can sell used goods to people to make a little bit of extra money. What goes on there as well, though, is that there's a lot of stolen property going on in there, being sold there. But brand new, good property value is being sold for a fraction of its value, about 25 cents on the dollar of that. So, bottle of Tylenol sells in the store for about $30. Vincent actually, he said he could get about $3 or $4 a bottle for that. So imagine how many bottles of Tylenol he's got to steal for a $300 a day habit. So he couldn't go into a store and just take one or two at a time. For Vincent, it was go into a London Drugs or some other pharmacy with a big duffel bag, open the duffel bag, try and fill it as best he could, and make a break for the door. He wasn't really good at it because he got caught in Vancouver downtown, then he got caught in South Vancouver, then he got caught in Burnaby, then he got caught in Richmond. Because he got arrested every time, and he had conditions not to go to that store, not to go to any other drugs in the Lower Mainland, and it just kept snowballing from there, right? So, but that was Vincent in the head of his addiction. I'll talk to him a little bit later about Vincent a little bit later as well. Another gentleman, if you saw that, does anyone remember seeing the documentary Through the Blue Lens? It was done by the National Film Board of Canada, so it still remains as National Film Board of Canada's one of their top-selling documentaries to this day, or top-playing documentaries to this day. If you saw it, this is Randy Miller. Randy Miller in the 1980s was being scouted by the Minnesota North Stars at 16 years of age as a junior hockey player. He was headed towards a career in the NHL, and when he got there to junior hockey, 16 years of age, older guys, basically what they decided is that they're going to teach Randy how to party. And so it turned into booze, turned into a couple of joints after a game, and eventually for Randy it was cocaine and it was heroin in the end. He said as a kid he used to dream about hockey at night. What plays he could make on the ice, how to pass the puck, how to move around. He said he knew he was in trouble because he started dreaming at night about heroin in his next fix. And that was Randy, probably the worst part of his addiction. You can see his right leg is severely infected. He's got a Band-Aid on, it's all bloodied up. But Randy spent the better part of 30 years from the outside of his side as an addict. Here's a quick one. Anyone know the definition of addict, what it means? So it comes from Latin. Actually, any of you are like STA or Vancouver College alumni, Doug Rogers. Doug Rogers is a teacher in Vernon. He's got some family members and stuff. I met Doug in Vernon a few years ago, but he's got links to Vancouver College and stuff like that. We learned that from him. So the definition of an attic, it means slave. It's derived from Latin, it means slave. So this is where I learned about my addiction. Yeah.
It also means using against your will.
Does it really?
Yeah. So
Thank you.
if you have a predisposition that you talked about earlier,
Yeah.
people who have addictive personalities or
Yeah.
alcoholics, they consume against their will, like,
Yeah.
with the best of intentions. So,
Okay.
so they are a slave,
Yeah.
and that's why, because they're
Yeah.
they have the intention still. They don't want to, but
Yeah.
they can't help themselves.
Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you. So as far as addiction goes, this is where I learned about it. So here's a map of British Columbia. You start to zoom in. You can see the Lower Mainland. You can see Stanley Park there right in the middle. Then you can see BC Place. Just above it, you can see Rogers Arena, where the Canucks have not disappointed us yet again this season. And this area, the area highlighted is one of the defined areas of what they call the downtown east side. And this red highlighted area is where I work as part of the beat enforcement team. Now, the reason I was talking about the geography is because it is a very small area as far as Vancouver goes. Not only in land size, but also in population. About 18,000 people that live in the downtown east side. That's 3% of the city of Vancouver's population. From the 18,000 people, there's roughly about 7,000 people suffering from an addiction to some type of substance, whether it be legal or illegal. Go back to that 18,000 people, there's estimates there's up to 7,000 or 8,000 people struggling with some type of mental health issue. Anything from bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, and there's estimates that as many as 2,000 people in this particular area are either undiagnosed or unsupported in their mental health issues. Those are estimates. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even higher than that as far as mental health goes. Absolutely. The other side of it is probably about 20 to 30% of the city's violent crime happens within 3 to 4 blocks of me in Hastings. And prior to January 28, 2023, the majority of drug arrests where charges were forwarded to Crown Council, again, were within the downtown east side, 20 to 30% of the drug arrests. Keeping in mind, since 2008, the VPD has not charged people for simple possession. So the whole idea that we're now in this age of decriminalization, that's a province-wide policy. That's something we haven't done in the downtown east side since 2008. For whatever reason, whether it be Crown Council deciding that it wasn't in their interest to pursue criminal charges. So, but very small area, very small population, but a lot of crime, a lot of violence, and a lot of open-air drug use. And probably since 2012 moving forward, we were starting to see this on a regular basis, right? And that's just people, open-air drug use, and people overdosing on the street. And that is one of the reasons why we are suffering from a shortage of paramedics. Because what's happening right now, and this has been going on since 2012, is that when an overdose happens, that a paramedic or a EHS vehicle with their partnership, they get dispatched to that on a priority basis. So anything else gets put down on the queue. We are responding to overdoses as a priority one. Anything else will probably go below that. Right? What are we saying in the province? 6 overdose deaths every day. A little more background about the downtown east side, and as far as the police presence. So by 2010, we had a reduction in the actual number of police officers that were physically present in the area. We had an expansion of safe consumption sites. Prior to 2010, the only safe consumption site was at Insight, which is at just to the west of 159 East Hastings, which is the Belmont Hotel, but there's a supervised area called Insight. Since then, we've had an expansion. There's one in the west line of 300 Main, there's one in the west line of 400 Main, there's one at Columbia and Hastings, there's another one in the unit block of West Hastings, and pretty much every single room occupancy hotel run by BC Housing, they do have a consumption room inside each apartment, like inside their SRO. They have a room where people can go and consume their drugs. So we also had a big push to stop issuing tickets to people as far as any sort of street disorder, so anything related to the Motor Vehicle Act, jaywalking, anything like that. There was a big advocacy push to stop issuing tickets for people that are doing things like that are doing the things I mentioned. We had basically an expansion of the downtown east side where it has expanded into other areas, like it's gone into Yaletown, it's actually moved west. And the city and actually the province have turned around and they purchased a lot of other old hotels. There's the Howard Johnson on Granville Street, the Holiday Inn on Helmconnect at Howe Street, that turned into an SRO. There was another one in 300 block West Pender, an old hotel that got turned into an SRO. So there's been an expansion of single room occupancy hotels, and it's left the downtown east side, and it's made a big push west. And starting last week, we had decriminalization. And all of these issues, I think, are contributing towards an increase in drug use and addiction. That's my personal opinion. Time will tell. So, and all of that, what we're seeing now is a big push from a lot of advocacy groups is what they're saying is that there's a lack of safe drugs for people to consume on the street. So there's a big push, you'll hear the terminology coming out now, what they're calling safe supply. And that's the next big push that will be happening. So as far as drug use and consumption goes, so what is a drug? A drug is anything that you put into your body that changes the way in which your body and your brain functions, excluding food. And there's a lot of doctors now, there are a lot of medical professionals that are saying we should actually start looking at white refined sugar as a drug because of the way people behave when they start taking it. So. Next one, why do people use drugs? There's a whole bunch of reasons why. So emotional, physical trauma, peer pressure, family environment, people are bored, they're curious about it, and the last one, pleasure, right? Who doesn't want to feel better? So the other part about it is that when I do talks with kids, there's always this push. Years ago when I was in school, there was that, if you want to call it reefer madness, that if you use that one time, you will become an addict, you will become homeless, you'll wind up living out on the street. And when I do talks to kids and stuff, I will be the first one to tell you, simply because you're experimenting doesn't mean you will become an addict. And actually, the research behind it confirms that. But the other side of it is that if you do start to experiment and you do become addicted, your ability to recover from that addiction to maintain some sort of functional sobriety is also extremely low. So very hard to get addicted, but if you do get addicted, your ability to become sober and functional is also very low. So, and it doesn't just happen overnight, it goes through a variety of stages. So that first one is experimentation. Next one, you start to use it recreationally. Maybe you start using it as a coping mechanism. You go to bed at night, you can't get yourself to sleep, so you take something to calm yourself down. You're too sluggish in the morning, you take something to give yourself a lift, right? And then you get to that final stage of addiction. Well, what does addiction look like? So addiction basically is needing the drug versus wanting it. If you stop using the drug, you're going to suffer from withdrawal. You build up a tolerance to the drug, meaning you need more of that particular drug in your system to get the desired outcome. And you're going to continue to use despite negative consequences. And I'll talk about negative consequences later on. So what you're watching right now is a gentleman, he's in what we call basically a stimulant-based psychosis. So he either be using something like cocaine or crystal methamphetamine, and what they wind up doing is they wind up taking it. But when the drug starts to wear off, they start to come down from it. A lot of people addicted to stimulants, they don't like that coming down feeling. What do? You take more, and you get that sensation back, right? And you keep going and going, and there'll be people that'll stay away for days. They'll stay away for days at a time. And eventually you get to that point where things stop working. Like your brain actually needs to sleep to recover, right? And then you get into episodes like this.
Well, I started drinking and smoking weed when I was 13, and then I kind of quit that, and then I got introduced into crack by a cousin, and then in Vancouver, we got to Vancouver, got into heroin as well.
And so what type of drugs are you using now? Like what would you say your main drug problem is?
Heroin and crack.
And how do you use your drugs?
I smoke crack and I inject heroin and sometimes cocaine. And speed.
So this is an interview we did years ago. Her name is Heather Yellowbird. She is from the Hobima Reserve in Alberta, Black Valley. When we interviewed her, she was 27 years old. She'd spent more than half of her life in addiction. And Heather was one of 4 sisters, and all 4 sisters suffered a really bad trauma. And Heather and 2 other sisters and a cousin, they decided the way that they were going to deal with things was to basically mask what it is they were dealing with. So for them, it started with alcohol, and eventually it turned into pot, and eventually for them, like Heather said, it was cocaine and heroin. And Heather spent more than half of her life in addiction. So at 27 years of age, when we interviewed her, she had already been living in Vancouver, I think, for 5 or 6 years, but half of her life was spent living as somebody suffering from addiction. She wasn't a violent individual. Heather actually did sell drugs to support her addiction. And you can hear I'm talking about her in the past tense. About 6 months after this interview, Heather was found she had overdosed in her apartment by her roommate. She did sell drugs to support her addiction. She wasn't violent. She was probably more often a victim than somebody that would use violence. She was getting beaten up all the time, and she was getting beaten up either by people that she was selling to that would rip her off, or because she got ripped off, the people that she was working for were laying beating on her. But 6'1", absolutely interesting person to talk to. Loved playing sports as a kid, right? She said she was already 6'1" when she was 13 or 14 years old, right? So really bad trauma. They started using to mask what had happened to them. Their oldest sister in the family, she said she didn't go down that road. She actually talked to somebody and she got into counseling. Pretty dysfunctional family, but she got into counseling. She got married, got into a career. She lives in Edmonton now, and we met her about a year after Heather passed away. And she said she knew what Heather was going through here. And she said, as bad as my days are, my bad days are still better than Heather's best day. And she knew that, right? It was absolutely horrible. Like I said, there's another person who really enjoyed talking to her. And you have to understand down there as well, people don't necessarily want to talk with the police. Any sort of interaction you have with the police down there, you sort of look at as a rat, right? You're always talking to the police. A lot of people don't like that, and sometimes there are consequences for it. But Heather would openly sit there and just talk to us, right? So she wasn't bothered by any potential consequences.
Question, you're mentioning like Heather's coming from outside of Vancouver. What percentage of people would you say are not actually from the greater Vancouver area that come from elsewhere? And the follow-up to that is that all the things that you're describing in Vancouver with how things are expanding, is that attracting more people to Vancouver as well?
I think, yeah, good question. There's never been any data gathering as to where people are coming from. What I can tell you is that I don't know of anybody that's been born in East Van or the downtown east side that I've dealt with. Majority of people are coming from, whether it be from the suburbs of Vancouver, even South Vancouver, right? Or the North Shore, Burnaby, Coquitlam, Fraser Valley, the interior. Majority of people we're dealing with they are not from down there, right? And is it attractive? I think every city in any community or in any part of the world will have sort of a downtown east side. I think we are attracting people simply because of what it is we're facilitating down there. Like I said, we don't charge people for simple possession anymore. When I started down there in 2006, even in 2008 when we stopped charging, it doesn't mean we let you continue doing it, right? We would stop you, we could still arrest, we just wouldn't charge people, we would seize drugs, and we would destroy them, right? Now, like in the last 5 years, it's been, we don't even stop people anymore. Lecture them sometimes that it's ignorant because they're doing it right out on the supervised injection site. They could simply go inside and use there. And a lot of times I don't feel like it, right? But it'd be interesting. I'd love to see it, but there'd be a lot of agencies that'd be against that, right? Because they would see it as stigmatizing people somehow because now we're trying to find out where people are from. But I think we're definitely facilitating that. it is being facilitated. Time will tell. We're the only province in Canada now that just decriminalized simple possession. So as of last week, you're allowed to possess up to 2.4 grams combined of any type of illicit substance. So there's methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, MDMA, ecstasy, up to 2.4 grams collectively. You'll be allowed to keep it and you can't seize it. Yeah,
So what would a fix be? How much?
0.1 grams.
Oh. Okay.
So I can actually show you some of that too. So yeah.
Is this going to sort of drive the drug trade in terms of making it easier for?
You know what? I don't think it'll necessarily make it easier. You know what? It's funny because like 2.4 grams was not like I know pretty well where they came up with the number of 2.4 grams. Kind of reluctant to say it because I want you like being recorded, but one of my old partners is a court-recognized drug expert, and several of her reports were reviewed, and they came up with this number of 2.4 grams as being the amount that they're allowed to possess. Drug dealers that we were dealing with in 2006, 2007 already, they would not give more than a gram at a time to their workers, because if they did, there was the potential that the workers were going to take off and sell the drugs, keep the money, or use the drugs, right? And then we know there was a particular group, they were actually shorting their workers, so they would tell them, here's a gram, that'd be 10 doses for you to sell, but they sell it like they give it to them in bulk, and it's up to the worker to piece it off to sell, typically crack cocaine. They were intentionally shorting their workers because the workers they were using were women, and they were intentionally shorting them. So then when the girl comes to pay her tab at the end of the day, she's only got $80, she doesn't have $100. What do you think is going to happen? Well, debt's got to be paid, and they were using that and basically making the girls perform sex acts to pay off the debt. So those are the type of people I'd like to concentrate on as far as who I saw with the problems were. There are predators down there. Take drugs out of the equation down there are still predators down there, and those are the people that I was taught to go after. So, but 2.54 grams, you know, a lot of the dealers, they know, they knew that already. Now, the legislation in simple possession, right? If you're holding a certain amount of drugs, but you're holding other items in your possession that is an indication that you're trafficking, you can still get arrested and charged for it. But the big thing is what we usually work off of, like the starting point is usually how much you have on you to begin with. And some coworkers that are still in downtown Eastside, they told me this week, they actually sent me a photo, and they got a lot off the one guy. Like I don't think they knew who it yet. But I think he was the delivery guy that they managed to pick him off. So, anyways, yeah.
Do you think that the decriminalization is because the government wants to reduce the financial burden on the judicial system and money spent on policing, or what are your thoughts on why?
You know what? I have no idea, because if you're somehow going to try and save on the judicial system, where you're going to be putting it, you're going to be throwing it into the medical system. Yeah. Now that being said, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of having people not go through the criminal justice system as far as their addiction goes, but what we have right now is nothing. And I know that a lot of people will talk about the Portugal model, and they talk about how Portugal decriminalized drugs several years ago, and that what a great success story is. The thing that a lot of people don't realize with that is what Portugal also did is they decriminalized simple possession, but what they have is a dissuasion committee, and that police can still arrest somebody for possession, but then you are obligated to go to appear before a committee. I think it's a social worker, a psychologist, and a medical doctor, and they have a carrot and a stick approach, and they are offering people treatment. They are offering opportunities to quit using, but if they don't, they are talking mandatory treatment. So basically incarceration for them to stop using the drugs. And also the stick is they lose their social funding like welfare and possibly any social funding or social housing. So that's the part no one ever talks about with the Portugal model. And Doc right now works in the downtown Eastside, Dr. Bill McEwen. What he said is that the biggest problem in Canada with everything that we're dealing with is that Portugal went down the road of the collective we is more important than individuals. Not that individuals don't matter, but in terms of addiction, the collective is more important than the individual, and we haven't got from the me to the we yet as far as drug use and addiction goes. And I know that we were talking about mandatory, how do you call it? Involuntary, not treatment, but involuntary, basically committing involuntary committal, right? Committing somebody to a facility without their consent. So, and that's gonna go through the courts as a charge. You can see that. So, should I keep going? Sorry. Okay, so something's related, yes, this has changed probably over the years. Biggest killer in Canada, what do you think it is? About 42,000 Canadians die every year from substance abuse. What's the biggest killer? Yeah.
Heroin.
No, not even close.
Alcohol.
Number 2.
Cigarettes.
Tobacco, absolutely. Right? Now, this is going to have some changes with the onset of with the onset of fentanyl and the fentanyl crisis we're talking about. But still, the majority of people that are dying from substance-related deaths are going to be tobacco and alcohol. And what have we been doing about tobacco for the last 67 years now? We've been discouraging its use, right? Kids get that message. Kids are getting that messaging at a very young age. That smoking is dangerous and it's not good for your health, right?
Is vaping undoing that though?
I don't think so. I think they're slowly coming around as far as vaping goes. And but you know what? Vaping's new territory as well as far as the research goes. Like there was a lot of research initially about the dangers of vaping. Guess who's paying for that, by the way? It was the tobacco companies. And then all of a sudden the research on the harms of vaping went away. A lot of tobacco companies started buying vaping companies, right? So, as far as how drugs are consumed, there's nothing new, nothing miraculous about that. 3 simple ways: ingesting it, inhaling it, or injecting it. So, and is there any way that's more addictive than the other? No, because there are certain drugs, that is how you consume it. You inhale it. Crack cocaine, you cannot inject it, you cannot ingest it. You have to inhale crack cocaine into your body. But there are people that are addicted to crack cocaine. So the delivery system doesn't make one particular drug more addictive than the other. So when we talk about ingesting, so alcohol, liquors, what you're looking at is a gentleman who's about to inhale. What he's doing is smoking fentanyl. And they actually call this chasing the dragon, terminology from heroin back in the 90s. When they heat up the opiate on the foil, it actually starts to swirl. The smoke pattern swirls up, and they use a straw or a hose or something, and when they inhale it, they're chasing it back down the foil. They call that chasing the dragon. For parents, you ever see some of these things around? It doesn't mean like get alarmed or anything like that. Just recognize that particular type of pipe is typically used for smoking crystal methamphetamine or for smoking fentanyl. Right? So it's basically a piece of glass pipe, and you close the end off, you expose heat, and then you start blowing in the end, and then it blows the end of it out. It expands it, and then they poke a hole into it where they drop the drugs into it. How about other things? You start to see foil with little dark spots around it. Again, it doesn't mean you have to freak out or anything like that. Just be aware of things like this that are around. And may not even, it doesn't even mean it's your own kids. You might see it in your neighborhood. Just be aware of it. Again, piece of Pyrex pipe, about 1/4 inch in diameter. This is for smoking crack cocaine. It's got Brillo in the end of it, so they put Brillo in it. It's because they break the piece of crack cocaine up and then they wedge it into the Brillo, and then they light that end up, and then they inhale the vapors through it. And the reason the pipe is all frosty like that is because it's actually cocaine residue. And then usually what they want to do is they'll take a stick or a little small piece of steel, and then they scrape the inside of the pipe, called that pushing the pipe, and then they take that residue and then they put it back on the grill and they smoke that again. So here's just a variety. That is the naloxone kit. You've seen naloxone kits. Always, you're seeing them flying around, they're sitting around. Take a look and see what's inside of them. Naloxone is the drug used to counteract the effects of an opiate, of fentanyl. And there's hundreds of these things around, and then rubber hoses and stuff like that. So that's all for inhaling the drugs. Next one is injecting. It is quite bothersome. I've been seeing this, like I said, since 2006. I had a very sheltered life. You see a lot of drug use growing up, people smoking pot and stuff like that, but then getting thrown down into the downtown east side where people were watching people openly inject into their bodies, right? That's intravenous, so it's going right in there, trying to inject it directly into their babies, not into the muscle tissue or anything like that. So then just some of the paraphernalia that goes with it. So the blue thing is a tourniquet to make the veins pop out. Top left-hand side there is a cooking spoon. So they usually cook the drugs up to get the impurities out of it. And then the blue, the lighter blue tube there, that's actually a water ampule. So what they realized several years ago is that the water, people are using dirty rainwater to mix their drugs to inject into their body, and that was causing a lot of health issues. So they started giving away water ampoules as well. And last I heard, we're giving out probably 3 to 4 million needles a year alone in the downtown east side. So, and that was done on the basis to prevent or to reduce transmission, hepatitis C, HIV.
What happens with all that garbage?
It's discarded. They tried several years ago, they put these drop boxes in the lanes all around the downtown east side. And the idea being is that once you're finished using it, you can go and put your needle in there. If you ever dealt with anybody from addiction, the last thing they really care about is the needles they discarded. There's some that actually do, but for the most part, they don't care, right? And we've actually caught people breaking into those dispensers, and they're trying to use the leftover drugs there in the needles. It's absolutely disheartening to see. So again, just some more paraphernalia for injection, right? So lighter, cooking spoon, the needle itself, that one's loaded and ready to go, and then the little piece of paper there, that's actually with the drugs coming. I can show you more of those. How much more time have I got? Sorry. I got time?
Yeah, about 3 hours.
Perfect. So, when I go to schools and I talk to kids about drugs, for myself, I keep it very simple, easy to explain for myself. I don't get into it as far as what drugs are legal and what drugs are illegal. I don't talk about street drugs versus prescription drugs. I talk about drugs, basically how it has an effect on the human body, right? And we have 3 ways that that's categorized. So the first one, stimulants. Out on the street, a lot of the stimulants, they'll call it pup. People that are selling cocaine, it's kind of neat if you dress in plain clothes. It's really hard for me because I'm a horrible undercover police officer. Apparently I walk and talk police officer all the time. But I get lucky every so often. You can just stand there and you can hear the lingo that's going on. And a lot of, like, when they sell stimulants, they'll talk about they're selling pup. You know, I got powder cocaine. And it's a whole different world of terminology that goes on with it. But if you hear people talking about pup in reference to drugs, it will usually be a stimulant, right? So stimulants includes a wide variety of drugs, but what it actually does is that it stimulates the central nervous system, so it gives you a boost of energy. People that use stimulants, they feel more awake when they use it, right? And the problem for people when they're suffering from addiction, like I said before, they don't like that feeling when they come down. So they take more and keep going and going and going. Eventually, they get to a point where the body starts to break down and they can't function. So, legal versus illegal, right? What do these particular items contain as far as a stimulant goes? Caffeine, right? Every morning, giddy up, right? Have a nice cup of coffee, well, caffeine, right? It's a stimulant, it gets you going into it. And funny enough, when they're mixing fentanyl to sell it out on the street, they're usually mixing it with powdered caffeine and not just caffeine, right? It's a buffer, but it's a stimulant, right? So then, as far as other ones, tobacco, right? It is a stimulant, right? And this is where I got into that, for how many years, they were promoting cigarettes as being healthy. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, wait a second, this stuff isn't healthy for you. And I always bring that one up because I think what we've experienced in the last 20 to 25 years, that cannabis or marijuana is healthy, that it's not bad for you. We have a lot of people that are advocating that. If you're an adult and you want to go do that, fine, whatever. But the last thing a kid needs is any sort of substance getting into their body, right? And then we got into We're talking about vaping, right? So this one, you're gonna have to forgive me, I do have to read off of this one because all the different names they have for it, unless someone's really proficient or understanding about vaping. So here we go. Different types of names for vaping, like the devices themselves. Mods, vapes, sub-ohms, vape pens, e-hookahs, tank systems, electronic cigarettes, e-cigarettes, electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS. Those are all the different types of marketing names or names they have, right? And the big thing is that vaping, it contains nicotine, right? So what we have studies from 2018 to 2019, the prevalence for people consuming or using them among students has doubled, right? Since 2016 to 2017, so the number of users doubled. And 20% of the students surveyed said that they've used e-cigarettes in the past 30 days. So since 2019, we're seeing an increase. Now what's happened since that, I couldn't tell you. I haven't seen any studies about it. But the idea that you are safely putting some sort of substance into your lungs and that there isn't some sort of consequence to it does not make any sense to me, right? So the one called the Juul Pod has the same amount of nicotine as 20 cigarettes in one pack, right? Thing about vaping, it develops very quick dependence. It increases your chances of actually smoking traditional cigarettes. And it also contributes to a worsening of existing lung conditions, so lung cancer and chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, or COPD. So short-term symptoms, coughing, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, vomiting. You know, there was one they were calling it, what is it? There was some type of, what was it? Some sort of like a lung cracking or something like that.
The popcorn one?
Popcorn, yeah. So I don't even know, like I've heard some studies are coming out dispelling that myth. But regardless, like I said, inhaling something into your lungs on a continuous basis, and it's something that seems to be chronic. Like when you see people vaping, it's not just one and then they put it away for an hour, it's just like they're hauling off on that thing. I had some coworkers, they started vaping, and they were on that thing for their entire shift, like every couple of seconds they were vaping with it, so. Now, getting into the illicit side, cocaine. Powder cocaine, crack cocaine. So this is crack cocaine. You can see that piece that is on the quarter there. That's what they call that a 20 watt. So it's worth about $20. And depending on the vulgarity of someone's addiction, that can last up to an hour, and that lasts up to several hours. People that are severely addicted, like I said, they don't like that feeling coming down. They chip away at it, and they'll put it into their pipe and they'll keep smoking it. But some people, they'll use that up in 20 minutes easy. You know, but imagine $20 an hour, and then now you're on this binge, and you're staying awake for 24 hours, and you're spending $20 every hour, and now you're going to stay awake for 3 to 4 days, and you're going to have to pay for that addiction somehow. Cocaine, actually, the purity and quality of cocaine in the downtown east side started to really diminish over probably since 2010, 2011. If you're aware of this, drug dealers, they make their weight or make their money by selling the drug by weight. And if you take a certain amount of the drug and then you add what they call buffer dead weight to it, you double your weight, you maintain your profits, or you double your profits, right? So, they were using things like anhydrous caffeine, they were using a whole bunch of other types of buffers in cocaine years ago. And what we saw was a major shift towards people switching over to crystal methamphetamine. A lot cheaper to make, a lot cheaper for people to buy, and the high will last a lot longer than crack cocaine does. But we saw a huge shift from like predominantly it was a crack cocaine market from the mid-90s up until probably about 2009, 2010. As far as stimulants go. There's still crack cocaine down there, right? But I would say by far the predominant drug we saw being used was crystal methamphetamine. So any sort of stimulant that you're using, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, an ability to calm down or sleep, potential cardiac arrest, and also audio and visual hallucinations, which is absolutely terrifying if you're dealing with somebody that's suffering from a hallucination as a result of the drug use. In a lot of cases, we are the enemy. Not that they hate the police or not that they hate us individually, but what they're hallucinating is that we are attacking them. Cases like that, people do not need to go to jail, they need to get to the hospital, they need medical attention. Doctors, paramedics will not deal with people until those people have been rendered harmless. And unfortunately, that falls on the police. And you can have as many, non-violent intervention workers as you want, but somebody in the psychosis brand, they take a weapon, somehow that person is going to have to be disarmed. And that's been left on the police. So that's the stimulant side of it. So when we get into the other one, depressants on the street, they call traditionally they call heroin down, right? So central nervous system depressants slows the breathing down, slows the heart rate down. A lot of cases makes people extremely relaxed when they consume it. And keeping in mind, none of these has anything to do with the mood of the individual. Talking up or down stimulants and depressants. Nothing to do with the individual's mood. It's basically just how the body is functioning when the stimulants come on board. For us, probably one of the biggest depressants that we deal with is alcohol. So beer, spirits, and wine. For your parents, the one I've been talking about the last 8 or 9 years, experienced this one myself with my kids. The introduction of extremely sweet tasting, fruity tasting alcoholic beverages. Who do you think this was designed for? This was designed specifically for youth, right? Have yet to meet a 12-year-old that tastes a little bit of whiskey or something and love the way it tastes. It's horrible, right? Well, this is simply marketing 101. Basically, they started coming up with products to sell to young people. The reason I talk about alcohol is because down where I work, or where I worked, is we were dealing with things like cooking wines, fortified cooking wines, alcoholic content, very high concentrations of salt in those. We had people dying from kidney failure, from other organ failures as a result of what the coroner was telling us at the inquest years ago was from the high salt concentration. Retired inspector in the DPD, he actually lobbied about the the Liquor Control Board to actually change, and that cooking wines of a certain alcohol concentration have to be sold in liquor stores and could not be sold in corner stores. High alcohol concentrations and extremely cheap, right? And they were being sold in corner stores. So going one step further, we have people drinking mouthwash, right? Want to go one step further than that? And this is alcohol addiction, right? Want to go one step further than that? Rubbing alcohol and hand sanitizer. The one on the right is a dispenser. You see them in the hospitals. We actually have people that have court-imposed conditions. They are not allowed to go into a medical facility unless they have a legitimate medical issue, because they will go into hospitals and they will bust open the dispensers and they will steal that bladder of hand sanitizer because it contains rubbing alcohol. And usually what they'll do with that is they'll mix it with water, maybe mix it with Gatorade if they can find something like that. But that's what they're drinking. When people always ask me, what is the most dangerous drug that's out there? And my answer is the one that you become addicted to. Because we have people that are addicted to alcohol and liquor. They've never tried to have people down there, like they're old timers. Never tried pot, never tried heroin, never tried cocaine. Their drug of choice is they found what they like, and that's alcohol. And for a lot of them, they can't afford liquor, so they wind up switching over to rubbing alcohol, hand sanitizers, and mouthwashes. So the next one, pills. A lot of central nervous system depressants come in the form of pills. Had a real big spike several years ago of fake Xanax pills going around. So Xanax, a lot of young kids being prescribed that for their anxiety, right? It is a CNS depressant. So they're being prescribed this, but we were coming across a lot of them. They were being doctored. They were fake Xanax pills. They were fake pills, and they had fentanyl in them, right? So a lot of fake pills. A lot of fake pills being sold that are made with fentanyl in them. Some are common. So then you get into things like Tylenol 3s, diazepams, anxiety pills. I talked about the Xanax pills. Right, and the last couple of years, the big one is Dilaudid. So it's a prescription. It's an opiate. It's for an opioid, right? And basically, they're small. But a lot of people being prescribed Dilaudid, and that's the pill that's being sold quite a bit in the downtown east side, especially on the corner of these days. a lot of people that sell, what's happened is that they are given a prescription and they're allotted, they will sell the prescription, and they'll take the money from that, and they'll turn around and they'll buy usually fentanyl. Fentanyl has become the illicit drug of choice in the downtown east side, as far as central CNS depressants go. So traditionally, years ago, this is what heroin looked like out on the street. So this, inside that little piece of paper, usually weighing about 0.10 grams, selling for about 20 bucks, is what it used to look like. And then about 2012, you noticed a big change in the appearance of it, right? People were buying what they thought was heroin, but it was more of a white powder. It was pretty much the introduction of fentanyl coming to Vancouver. And then with fentanyl coming out in the street, and we didn't know for a long time what was going on. All of a sudden, what we noticed, there was a major spike in overdose deaths. And then a traffic collision involving two gang members that went through a building somewhere. The vehicle was covered in, the interior of the vehicle, because they crashed, was covered in a white powder. And everyone at the time thought, oh, it must be cocaine. But they couldn't figure out why the two guys in the vehicle had overdosed, right? Their heart stopped beating, they're not breathing. They had all the symptoms of like a CNS depressant overdose, but there's white powder. And they're saying, well, it's cocaine, it's cocaine. Well, then they did some tests. They found out it was fentanyl. So that's where we went down the road of basically overdoses happening on the street. And prior to overdose teams roaming the downtown east side, the majority of the overdoses that were being discovered were probably by police officers. We didn't carry naloxone in at that time, and all we could do was start administering CPR to people and wait for the paramedics to arrive. And I showed you that first photo where it was, the fentanyl was white in color. So what we have now, what the dealers are doing is they're trying to market their particular product out to people in the community. So what they started doing is they started adding food coloring to their particular product. Not that it's safer, but they're marketing it in the sense of, I got the green stuff. You want the green stuff is good. Not safer, not better, but it's just simply adding a color to it and promoting it to people that it's the good stuff. Interestingly enough, when we do have an overdose now, what's usually happening is that there's people circling around and they want to find out what it is that person was using, and they're using, referencing like what color were they using. Some cases not to alert other people, but it's their belief that if they bought green, that the green is the good stuff, and that's what they go seeking out. So, and you have into like the sort of like the grays and the greens and the purples, you know, and the light purples and more greens and a lot more red. Simply trying to basically promoting it and people branding their particular batch that they're selling out in the street. And addiction being so harsh is that what you're looking at is a bunch of paramedics, they're treating a staff member that works at one of the supervised consumption sites. So you have a staff member that works somewhere that is advocating for people to use in a safe environment, and they could probably use there. They choose not to. They cross the street and they go into a lane and they start using and they overdose. So it's really hard to understand, like this is how severe addiction can be for people, that they're working in an environment where they can do that and there's no consequences for them, yet they choose not to, and they choose to go out into the lane a block away and overdose. Right? Fentanyl, extremely dangerous because it is extremely concentrated as far as an opiate goes and its ability to harm people. Basically, you get it into your system, your heart can stop beating, your lungs stop breathing. What you're looking at, the guy in the bottom right-hand corner is a notorious dealer, Dustin Welsworth. He and his girlfriend, they overdosed in their apartment when they were cooking. They were doing a cook of fentanyl, and they wound up dying. The two police officers in the background, that is pretty much how we are responding when we are investigating a clandestine lab. So that's what it is we're dealing with. How is it for everyone else? And a lot of these clan labs that we're coming across, they're in multi-unit or multi-dwelling facilities, they're in apartment buildings, right? So what's happening with all the other units? So the economics of fentanyl, so I'll get into this one really quick. Value of how much kilogram of heroin probably costs about $70,000. Kilogram will make about 20,000 doses. Heroin is sold by 0.1 grams or 0.05 grams. $20 a dose, let's say, and you're gonna make 20,000 doses, you make $400,000, right? Recognizing, yes, there's inventory shrinkage and spillage and everything like that, but those are the general numbers you're working with, right? So $40,000 for a kilo of heroin. Kilogram of fentanyl, $12,000 wholesale. Significantly cheaper. A kilogram of fentanyl can make you 1 million doses, and you're selling 1 million doses for $20 a dose. So you want to know why people are going to switching to fentanyl as far as what to sell. It's the economics of it. Not to mention that you can manufacture it in the plant lab, right? If you have the right precursors, you can manufacture it now. Everyone talked for years about it being like in the dark web, right? And that they're importing it from China. But the fact is, if you have the chemical precursors to make it, you can make it yourself here, right? But there is that motivation as to why people are doing it. So third category, first we had stimulants, depressants. Last one, sideways, psychoactive drugs, whole different category of those. Psychoactive drugs, also including synthetic drugs. Biggest problem in Europe for the last 10 to 15 years has been synthetic drugs, so ecstasy, stuff like that. I didn't come across a lot of it working in the downtown east side. I left, went back, and in 2019, started coming across a lot more of the psychoactive drugs. So seeing a lot more magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and just in the quantities that we were seeing on a regular basis. It blew my mind how much we were seeing of it. And then you start getting into the synthetic stuff, GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate, also known as the date rape drug, right? So it's a small bottle about that big, little cap. You can take a capful of it, and when the drug is on set, people that take it, what they talk about is having a complete and total memory lapse. You do not recall anything that's happened to you. Other thing about it is that a lot of people say that when people are under the influence of GHB, they're susceptible to depression, which means in cases of date rape is that they're not forcing people, but if you're susceptible to oppression, then it makes it a lot easier to sexually assault people. Odorless, colorless, a little bit of a taste like salt. I've been told, I do not know because I've never tasted this stuff in my life, but something to be aware of, right? We caution people when you're going out, especially young people, you can start going to parties and stuff like that. Don't turn your back on your drink. Trust your friends, hopefully. Give your drink. If you gotta use a washroom, you gotta go somewhere. But if you turn your back on your drink, do yourself a favor, leave it and get yourself a fresh drink. Dump that one out. Dealing with so many people the next morning, even from overconsumption of liquor, not knowing what happened to them. Seeing the look on people's faces, absolutely terrifying to watch people go through this. And nobody deserves to go through anything like that, right? But just be aware of it, right? It comes in other small types of containers. And then you get into ecstasy. So methyl-dioxymethamphetamine, ecstasy, Molly, MDMA, whole bunch of different recipes that they can make ecstasy up with. Drug manufacturers, people that are making ecstasy, always staying ahead of the criminal code by using different types and new types of precursors, different chemicals to make similar types of drugs, similar to ecstasy, and they're always staying ahead of it, right? There's always something new that's coming around the bend. Marketing it, right? Basically making it look like candy, relatively benign, relatively safe to use. Different ways that it comes in pills, comes in powder. When it comes in powder, they can put it in a little piece of tissue paper. They call it parachuting, wrapping it up and then swallowing it and then drinking it with water. And then, like I was talking about, just the new types of ones coming onto the market. This one blew my mind. We arrested a guy, he had a whole bag of these ones called trifluoromethylphenylpiperazine. It's a derivative of ecstasy. Try to get people with a chemistry background to teach us, but this is way over my head, right? It just doesn't seem right for me, like, simple cop, right? It doesn't seem right that, he said they were vitamins, I call BS on it. We sent it off to the Health Canada lab, and it comes back, and it was trifluoromethylpiperazine, or trifluoromethylphenylpiperazine, right? And again, just staying alert, but these are actually illegal, and we did charge that by which without possession for the purpose of trafficking, just for something like that. So then you're getting into like steroids, things like that as well, right? And all the derivatives of of that. I haven't stayed, I don't stay current in any of that, mostly because of where I work. I was dealing with like the stimulant-based drugs, so cocaine, crack, the presence of heroin, fentanyl, stuff like that. But then finally, we'll talk a little bit about marijuana. So derived from cannabis plant, and the active ingredient in marijuana was THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, or cannabinol, or cannabinol, right? That's the part that gets you high. There's a whole bunch of other types of chemicals inside of marijuana. Completely get that. There are some things that are good for the body potentially, but the main one that people get high off of is THC. And when I was going to university, the active concentration of marijuana was like 3 to 5%. What Health Canada is coming back with since prior to legalization was 18 to 20% on average, much higher concentrations of it. Right, and the big one that cannabidiol CBDs, they're saying there's some medical benefits to people using cannabidiol. A lot of the marijuana that came out in England for people for the benefits of having CBD, nobody was buying it. So that big push that CBD was beneficial to people, nobody was buying it, and what they were buying was pot, basically to get high. The other side about it, prior to legalization, if somebody is terminally ill and they're finding some pain relief from using marijuana, who might say, even as a police officer, like your dog, I completely understand that, right? Some people saying that there are some medical benefits to it. I've yet to read any conclusive studies saying that there are absolute medical benefits to the consumption of marijuana. Somebody has one that want to share it, absolutely want to read it, because I haven't seen anything that's conclusive about that. What I'm seeing a lot more reports though is that a lot more people are being admitted to hospitals and mental health facilities for marijuana-induced psychosis as a result of consumption of it. So I don't think that marijuana is contributing to people developing schizophrenia. I think people are predisposed to schizophrenia, and that the marijuana itself is contributing to it. But the particular people that were lobbying for it, I think they did a really good job of marketing it, because the first thing they did was normalize it, and then they medicalized it. It's not a drug, that's medicine. All you gotta do is put a label on it and say it's medicine. Can you think of any other medicine that is consumed by lighting it on a fire and smoking it? Right? But advocates will tell you, no, it's medicine, right? It helps with my anxiety. You know how many people I know that suffer from anxiety and they're smoking probably about 14 to 15 joints a day? It's like, you think that maybe that's contributing towards your anxiety? So, also want to say that, because I'm saying that, I'm not saying that marijuana is worse than alcohol. They're both extremely harmful, so I'm not trying to sit there and bash marijuana or anything like that, because I think everything within the realm for kids consuming it is harmful. So, and then getting into the concentration things, hash oils. I grew up in Alberta and lived in Ontario. Cannabis or marijuana bud, very rare in Alberta and Ontario. And people were like hash oils and hash. That was how people were consuming it. So, and then you guys heard something called shatter. So basically taking marijuana and basically refining it, and then you're getting this golden pasty type product. And basically you're putting that into a pipe, extremely high concentrations of THC in this stuff. Pretty terrifying to watch people that have been using it or over consuming it, and then developing psychosis from it. And THC vaping pens now as well, right? So if you see people vaping, especially kids vaping, you're seeing stuff like this, take a look at it, right? Because it could very well be in THC vaping pens. The other thing, synthetic cannabinoids that are coming out. And now in the last several years, I just seized these ones off of a guy in 100 block of East Hastings. He had a table set up. I thought for a second he was just selling and giving away candy and treats, right? These are all THC infused edibles. So cookies, and they're made to look like regular chocolates. They look like Oreos, right? Like this one's Fritos, right? The Rice Krispies treats, they're about is that they were going to regulate the cannabis industry and they were going to prevent this from happening. Right?
But that hasn't happened.
What?
The regulation.
Regulation has failed. Regulation has been an absolute abysmal failure. Like the most popular marijuana dispensary that was in Vancouver for years was an illegal one operating out of 100 East Hastings. You know? Drive through the 100 block of East Cordova, there's an old motorhome sitting on the north side. They sell pot out of there. And you know, there is a specific enforcement agency to do marijuana enforcement. And they're based out of the interior. They don't have enough people to do the enforcement of it. And you want to see what the failure, well, like if you want to see what if it's a failure or not, look how many dispensaries are going broke because there's a saturation in the marketplace of dispensaries. And the ones that are surviving are the illegal ones because they don't have to pay a business license, they don't have to pay income tax, they don't have to do anything legally, and they're thriving. So. Regardless, legal or illegal, as far as illicit drugs go, the quality control, what you're looking at is a clandestine lab that was making ecstasy. You can start to see the tables and all the equipment starting to rust out. I always like showing this one when I talk to kids, like, this is the environment. People that are working in these labs, a lot of them may have a good understanding of chemistry, but from an academic or a book perspective, not necessarily how things work in the real world, which is why in a lot of cases, cloud labs are blowing up because there's off-gassing from the chemical reactions, and the people that are doing this don't realize it. This is what a proper lab, this is the Health Canada laboratory in Burnaby looks like. I got to go there, actually got to learn how to make crack cocaine, crystal methamphetamine, ecstasy, but it's working under a hooded dome, right? And just in a safe environment. And the technician there, what he was talking about was like, yeah, the labs are blowing up because these guys are creating flammable and explosive gases and they don't realize what they're doing. The other side of quality control, my personal favorite, everyone knows what this particular container is. It's a Kinder Egg, right? So we kind of got in Gastown. There was a bunch of kids that were dying from what was called paramethioxine, PMMA, different type of ecstasy. The high is different from regular ecstasy. So when kids were taking a pill, they weren't getting high, so they thought it was weak, so they were stacking, they were taking multiple pills, and then they overdosed and they were dying. About the time that was happening, we caught a guy in Gastown, he was selling the pills. When we arrested him, he had about 2 pills in his hand and some money in his pockets. Couldn't figure out if it just didn't make sense that he only had 2 pills on him, so catch somebody for trafficking. What happened in a lot of cases that you go to the jail and you're going to get strip searched, so the gentleman got stripped down. And in a cell, sir, turn around, bend over and pull your butt cheeks apart. And the Kinder Egg fell out of his ass, right? So they call it suit casing, nothing new uncommon about that. But what we didn't find on him were gloves. So he was more worried about being arrested by getting ripped off from his competition or from his clients or his customers. So he was hiding. He would load up a couple pills in his hand, stick the container back up his ass, and he would sell some more. Then he'd go into the lane somewhere, pull it out, and get some more pills, right? But we didn't find any gloves on him. So when you're buying illicit substances, body orifices are a common way for people to hide their drugs. So that's food for thought. Also, we used to get people that were dealing crack cocaine. Crack cocaine's not water soluble, and dealers, they used to hold it in their mouth. And you go, when you buy from them, you give them the money, they'd spit the piece of crack out and they give it to you. Well, if they figured out it was the police, what do? They swallow all their drugs, and it's in the stomach, right? If we hold on to them for too long, they can't barf it up. So they pass it through the digestive tract, and it can be a couple $100 worth of crack going through their body. They're going to wash it off when they poop it out, and they're going to resell it, right? So that's been my career for the last 17, 18 years, right? Another one, promethazine. You guys heard like years ago they called it was purple drink syrup, right? We went to domestic and we found several thousand of these stickers, found a whole bunch of these brown bottles. Some of the stickers were already affixed to it, and then we found 11 of these bottles, or these big jugs, and then we found bottles and bottles of concentrated Kool-Aid, grape Kool-Aid, right? And they were starting to load that up inside the containers. We found out from the Drug Enforcement Agency this is a common way that they're selling fentanyl, because it's a central nervous system depressant, right? So what they're doing is they're mixing all this stuff together, and then they add the fentanyl to the liquid, shake it up, and then they're loading it up into the bottles and they're selling it like that. And the principal from Hansworth Secondary, I've had these photos for quite a few years now, but the principal at Hansworth, he actually showed me, he had a photo of that bottle with that particular label on it. So about 2014, 2015. So negative consequences, I talked about that as a result of addiction, right? First one is going to be relationships, whether it be girlfriend, boyfriend, your family members, parents, siblings, because the most important relationship you're going to have with your addicted is with the drug that you're wanting to consume. So relationships absolutely without a doubt suffer. The other part for negative consequences is your health, right? Overall general decline in your particular health. And then we were talking before about people from over-consuming stimulant-based drugs going into psychosis. So it's where an episodic break in which an individual has a break from reality. Drug-induced psychosis, it's related to the abuse of an intoxicant, right? That's a weekly occurrence for us. That's nothing out of the ordinary. And sometimes it's a matter of just coaxing the person into the ambulance and taking them there. And other times it does get physical, like where we do want to have a drop off somebody just to render them safe and then get them to the hospital. Usually in cases where there's severe psychosis, the ambulance is already queued up and they dispatch unit, they call it chemical restraints. So if the person is extremely violent, we restrain them and they'll actually incapacitate the individual and get them to the hospital. But they need to go to the hospital in those instances. Doctors will not treat them until they know they're safe. The other side, a lot of violence, right? Guy got into a fight in a bar in the Balmoral Hotel. About 14 people started fighting and bottles started getting thrown, right? So that's what we're dealing with, whether it's downtown East Side or Elbow Street, right? And basically a pecking order. This is a picture of Ryan. Ryan was a mid-level drug dealer when I first met him. He was actually dealing drugs and he was actually dealing with firearms as well when I first met him. And just as a result of probably 15 to 20 years of severe addiction, he's gone from the top of the ladder and he's at the bottom now and he's prey and he's getting picked on all the time, right? He's an easy target. If he ever has money, welfare, whatever, they take it from him. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, if you're young or if you're old. This is a 64-year-old woman that got beaten up by a drug dealer over a debt. And the dealer started imposing a tax or charging her interest for her debt. She said, I never renege on a debt, I don't pay interest on my debts, and I don't rattle people. But this guy, he put her to the ground and he kicked her repeatedly in the head. 64-year-old woman got beaten up by a 28-year-old drug dealer. And people were terrified. They just watched as she took her beating. Won't show this one for too long, but long-term health consequences as a result of drug use, right? Right? This guy is still using, right? The blood on his arm is from a fresh intravenous, from a fresh needle arm. He just continues to use. So when people sit there and say we need more harm reduction, we need more facilities for people to use their drugs, now we're going down the road of decriminalization and safe supply. We need more of that. He doesn't need more drugs. He needs treatment, and that's one thing we are not offering people. Everyone's been talking about it the last 4 to 5 years. Funny enough, like my mentors with Odd Squad, they've been talking about treatment on demand since the 1990s. and largely ignore it. When somebody says they want to go for treatment, they got to go right away. And that's what we are not offering people. That is not available right now.
And why is that?
Because it costs money. Because it costs money. Plain and simple. And recognizing the fact that when people go into treatment, there are going to be hiccups and there is going to be failures. People are going to relapse. I agree with that. Stop beating people up because they have a relapse, right? Keep them going, right? Encourage them to keep going with it. A hiccup is a hiccup, but they beat themselves. Like a lot of people that are addicted, they get clean and they relapse. They beat themselves up with it, right? And I sort of understand that feeling, but it's like take it as a hiccup, but encourage them to keep going, right? The other side about it is there's a lot of people in the downtown east side. They started using, became addicted as kids. They became entrenched in the drug culture. They're living somewhere like the downtown east side. That is all they've known. To simply tell somebody, you know, you need to stop using drugs because that'll fix everything. Well, if you're 21 years old, you didn't finish school, you don't have a trade, you don't have a job, to simply sit there and say, stop using, now what? Great, I'm not using, what am I going to do? A lot of them don't know how to apply for a job. They don't know how to get a job, right? It has to be comprehensive. You have to provide people opportunities to get out of it, right? And that costs money, right? So, but give people a chance, and we are not doing that, right? Someone says, I want treatment, you got to take them right there and then, right? They've got to go right at that moment. If you wait for an hour, they're gone, right? So, yeah.
It must be very frustrating for the police to look at that environment and personnel.
It is, but you know what? All the guys that I work with, like the on squad, they all pretty much did. Like I'm the new guy there. Like I worked there I think for 16 or 17 years, and I'm the new guy that worked down there, right? Toby worked there for 25 years. Al worked there for 28 years. They all spent like 20 some odd years down there. And the one common theme for people that seem to last down there is they did something with it, and they got involved volunteering, doing something healthy on the side. Most police officers down there, they last 2 to 3 years and then they're gone, right? And then you have the weird group that have 20 some odd years, they work down there and they just took something bad and tried to do something good with it, right? So, but the frustrating part is seeing allowing people to fail like that. It's absolutely disappointing. And then being told what they need is more of what they've been given, right? So, the other negative consequences, you're going to have a lot more police contact. And not because of the drugs in your possession, it's usually going to be the behavior as a result of your drug use, or the fact how you're going to pay for your drugs. I only know one wealthy individual who comes to the downtown east side to consume drugs because he had a very large inheritance, and everyone else, they were pretty much for the most part working for a family, or they had their money and they blew it all away, right? You're going to have to make it somehow, so you can usually end up doing that by committing crime. Whether you're boosting property, like I was talking about Vincent, stealing stuff, and then trying to sell it down at the market for a fraction of what it sells for. You know, we see these off of that who bought stolen property off of people. Like he goes down to the downtown east side and buys stolen property. And his employees are basically all the ones that are addicted and they're suffering and they want to buy stuff. Or sorry, they steal, and then he pays them pennies on the dollar. Right? Ever had your home broken into? Odds are it's going to be someone suffering from addiction. Anyone had your car broken into? Something stolen from it? Odds are it's going to be someone suffering from addiction. Delivery guy 2 blocks away from the downtown east side had his window smashed. He went into the delivery, comes back, window smashed, and his knapsack's missing. Right? But he had one of the Apple Pods? AirTag. Got his bag, got everything back. So, and guess where it was? It was in the market. Right? And then probably the worst way people are going to pay for their addiction is people like Chelsea.
When you're pregnant, it's funny, but there's some really weird people who have fetishes for pregnant women. Like, things you see are disgusting. Like, you don't really have a hard time as you have no self-esteem and you don't really care for the people what it is and you can make money anytime.
So this is Chelsea. I interviewed her in 2015. She was 3 months pregnant, and Chelsea was involved in what we call the survival sex trade. She was selling her body for sex to pay for her addiction. So many times with Chelsea, she would rip her dates off, and it was really hard to feel sorry for the Johns that got ripped off. Somehow, like, she managed to convince guys to take them back to their place. Because Chelsea, she would look very presentable. She would look clean and healthy, and guys would pick her up and she'd, let's go back to her place. There was one in particular, he took her back to his apartment in Kitsilano, and she convinced him to go for a shower. And when he hit the showers, wallet, cell phone, keys to the Mercedes, and she stole the car and she's gone, right? It is really hard to feel any sympathy for people that are preying on women that are involved in the survival sex trade. And I will say too, just because the survival sex trade is not exclusive to women, there are men that are selling their bodies for sex as well in the survival sex trade. It's absolutely horrific. And this is not a choice, right? And we have advocacy groups that are talking about decriminalization of prostitution because it's a lifestyle and it's a choice. Everything I've experienced down here is the survival sex trade. It is not about making a choice, right? So, Randy Miller, at the height of his addiction, in the 90s, reunites with his brother and his sister, goes cold turkey, goes into treatment, and he's been clean, I think, for, it's going to be coming up on 30 years pretty quick here. I bumped into Randy at the police academy in 2015. He saw me coming in, and it was a graduation ceremony at the police academy. A friend of his son was graduating at the police academy. And he's having a laugh about that. He says, who would have thought I'd be going to the police academy to watch somebody graduate? Randy traveled all throughout British Columbia and Alberta with Toby and Mark. And the only people that got searched and checked at the airport was Toby and Mark. And Randy got through clean and healthy. He actually had his longshoreman's card. He worked for several years. Probably as a result of his addiction that he suffered several strokes. He's on a long-term disability, but he's still alive and kicking. Vincent Tater, this is one of his last mug shots. Vincent did get arrested for trafficking, and he was wanted for quite a long period of time, and then he finally got pinched. And when he went to court, he actually asked the judge to remand him, and the judge didn't know it, because usually asking to stay in jail is bizarre. People don't ask for that. He wanted to plead to his charges right away and stay in jail because he knew that would get him away from the drugs. The judge actually sends him under agreement to what's called the drug treatment in Vancouver. Drug treatment court is basically you are given a suspended sentence. You are required to live in a treatment facility, recognizing there are sometimes slip-ups and stuff like that, but it is zero tolerance, but with an understanding to promote people and get people in a position to go for the long term for healthy living. So Vincent lived in a drug treatment facility, which is also residents that are subject to random drug tests. So at any time, Vincent wanted to give us a pee test today, and they said it. So Vincent was subject to 56 random tests, passed every one of them with flying colors, and this past June, he graduated from the drug treatment ward, got a job, and healthy again. So for me, this is a shining example of what the possibility is. It took a long time to get him down that road, and it was also to try and find a place where he could go as well. But he's working again. You know, haven't seen him, which is great, right? I keep in touch with his dad all the time. But also Vincent, he had a father that was very supportive, and was very, very understanding, but very helpful. And not everybody has that, right? But that for me is like, that is one of the best things actually really makes me feel really good inside. Just that is possible for people. So, summing up, especially for the young people, have a plan, short-term, medium-term, long-term. Find something to stay passionate about. Find something to get passionate about. Sports, music, theater, anything. Get involved in something. Don't sit on the sidelines. It's okay to say no. And take care of your friends. If you have a friend that's going to do something stupid and they're either going to get hurt from it or something bad, have the courage to stand up to do something for your friends. For parents, this was really tough for me, but if you think you're going down that road and someone, not necessarily your own kid, but someone you know, and they're possibly starting to abuse opiates, consider having a naloxone kit. The one on the left is intranasal, the other ones are intramuscular. I carry the intranasal one when I'm at work. I don't carry anything outside of it. But even in Dog Squad now, we started having the naloxone kits on the site. And not so much for the kids that we're dealing with, but mostly for the neighborhood and stuff like that. Recognizing we're talking about naloxone kits, if you do have one or you see one kicking around, check the inside of it. A lot of people that are using will wind up using it to store the drugs inside of it, and it is no longer a naloxone kit, right? If you do have somebody, especially your friends, and they're going into some sort of medical distress from whatever it is they're using, don't be afraid to call 911. Stick around with your friend. Don't just call 911, say where they are and leave. Stick around for your friend, right? Because sometimes we don't know who that person is. The paramedics don't know. And sometimes their name and date of birth can get information into the medical system if they have to go to the emergency room to help them out, right? The big one about that is there's something called the Good Samaritan Act. And that if any medical situation happens as a result of substance use, you cannot be criminally charged in that circumstance for simply using it. And now with decriminalization, that's a whole different issue, but we do not charge people if you call 911. We don't care, as police officers, sometimes we just gotta say, don't care about the drugs, and that's quite often. Let's make sure that the people are safe, especially young people. We don't want to see anyone dying or getting extremely injured, right? As a result of someone experimenting, using, anything like that. If you need help, you know what, or somebody that needs help, Central Addictions Intake Team, there's their email address. And the final one, if you have any questions, you can get a hold of me at david@dogsquad.com. You can check out our website. We're on Twitter, Facebook, social media. Thanks for your time.